sometimes I just like to strike somebody's curiosity or maybe speak for someone that's not sitting at our desk, in particular. And I'll kind of be their voice, not saying that's what I believe, but just being their voice to further the conversation or to get it a little more in depth. And then people online are so quick to judge you, like, oh, this guy, I see this guy, he's coming from this side. I hate what he's saying. He doesn't know what it's like to be a female. He doesn't know what it's like to be gay. He doesn't know what it's like to be black. And I don't know any of those things. Right. And, you get hammered with these labels nowadays, which is something that I really dislike. I like this. This is a conversation, right? We're talking, we're getting to know each other. This isn't a conversation. You're not having any conversation in 140 characters.
Welcome back to another episode of 2020. If you haven't gone to subscribe or like yet, please do. Go visit 2020-d.com. Go to your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, doesn't matter. Just go hit like and subscribe so that you can check out all the episodes we've done with some of the amazing guests we've had on. But once again, I'm Siobhán Cronin here with Ben and Cory. How you guys doing?
Wonderful.
Old Kinderhook.
Whatever that means.
It means okay.
All right.
So back for part 2, we have our fantastic guest from earlier in the week, Jeff Schroeder, who you may have seen or heard of from Big Brother or Around the World for Free. Getting a little deeper in this episode. If you haven't listened to part 1, definitely go check it out too.
Yeah, what's cool is he's a professional interviewer, so we got free tips in this episode.
And got to learn a little bit about like the Midwest mentality and how completely different it is from Hollywood and all that, and the production and what it takes to put on shows and what it takes to really be in television, which is crazy because he does it at such a large level that it's kind of insane.
So definitely lots to learn.
And he's literally a world traveler. Yeah.
Yeah. So check it out. Jeff Schroeder, part 2.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, glad that you stuck around for part 2 this week, 2020. I'm Siobhán Cronin, and I'm here with my cohorts, as we have deemed each other, Benny Goodman.
What's going on, Siobhán?
That's the most excited you've sounded for an introduction I gave you.
I'm actually really excited to hear our guest interview you, but we'll get to that.
All right.
Seemed a bit contrived to me. I don't know.
Well, Mark
Cory
Burnett's sitting in the corner, just looking at us.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And of course, part 2 with our fabulous guest, Jeff Schroeder. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. Thanks for hanging out.
The bass player.
And Cory pays it. Well, I tried to introduce Cory, but you kept talking, which is why you've forgotten everything that you've heard about me because you're too busy talking.
Oh, damn.
Just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
It's all right.
Shit gets wild in the second episode.
Yeah, well, now that the gloves are off, let's put Jeff...
I get feistier in the second episode because I'm usually one glass of wine in, so here we go.
Admittedly, Jeff had to work to get around to the globe in the show that I met him on, Around the World for Free, and he never hooked me up other than a few high fives, and he did get me Portillo's, I think, once when I was in Chicago, so I appreciate that. But I would like now that he's a total professional to watch him interview the only thing we have going for this show, which is Siobhán. And actually probably the production value, because Cory behind the scenes, as Jeff alluded to on our previous episode you should listen to, you should know how fluid it actually sounds when we do this, because when we actually do it, it's terrible.
I don't know that it's that terrible. Cory just tightens it up a bit.
I don't touch a thing.
He's like the 2020 Kegel muscle. So Jeff, would you be so kind as to show us what a true blue professional does when they want to interview someone for a show? Let's say
or you can just talk about what it's like to interview. It doesn't have to be
Live.
me.
Yeah, he's on many shows I had to write him down.
As opposed to you, Benny, getting it all tight and sharp. I love the behind the scenes aspect of things, right? I like it raw. I like it loose. I grew up, well, not grew up, but in this business, I grew up doing all live. The show I did for CBS was live, the after show for CBS.com. The show I'm currently on right now is all live, and I love that. I feel more comfortable when I'm live as opposed to where where I could get many takes at it, right? So even if I'm just introducing something like, guys, stick around, we're going to be back with Benny Goodman. I'm like, you know, I could do that better. Let me do it again. And I'll keep doing it because I want to make it sound perfect. By being live, you let that go and all that's gone. You're like, it is what it is.
Yeah,
sorry, Benny, you got a shitty intro. You know?
Oh, we're used to it.
And so I like that part of just being raw and real. And part of that rolls over into how I host or if I'm interviewing somebody. Just curiosity, you know, it's like I would do my research, Siobhán, if I knew more about you. I got to know you a little bit in the
of course
episode. But I think curiosity is the best way to go. So many of these questions nowadays, you know, use an example, any daytime show or late night talk show, it's so scripted, right? Their agents and publicists has to talk to this person's agent and publicist, and it's like what you want to. It's like. That's not real.
Everything's a setup.
That's all being scripted. That's all being pushed. And nobody's talking about what's really going on in their lives. And sometimes the best interviews are just like, you know what, man? I like Scrabble. Like, man, I didn't know Dave Matthews likes Scrabble. I just grabbed that. As you said, you're playing violin. But it's like sometimes the dumbest things are just interesting to someone as opposed to what their job is, right? As Dave Matthews playing music. So
that's amazing. Yeah. Go ahead. Go on. Sorry.
No, what I was saying is like I would ask you because you're very proud of your music. That's what you do. That's what you're known for, I would assume. But I'd also want to know about you, Siobhán, what you do in real life, right? Like do you like gardening. It sounds silly, and that's the part Benny could edit out. But getting to know you more as a person, right?
No, absolutely. And that's funny that you say that because that's a lot of the reason. Well, one of the many reasons we started this podcast too is even for me playing in a rock band, for example, we go to press interviews, you know, and it's always the same, you know, people that either work for a radio or they're working for some press magazine. It's a lot of the same questions, the stuff that's scripted that they think people want to hear about. But you rarely hear musicians or actors or TV personalities interviewed by other people that are on that side of the industry. You know, so we try to take a somewhat different perspective in the way we talk to people and ask the stuff that's like we want to know about, you know, as people that are kind of in the same world. So that I think that's a totally awesome tip is, just to be curious and to try and ask about stuff that you might not think is important, you know, because that's what your average person's going to relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get to know them on a personal level, right? They're not just the guy who played a superhero. They're a guy. Because everyone, that's another thing. Like being in this business, there are awesome people in this business. There are very talented people in this business. I'm not one of them, so I have to grasp at straws. But everyone's just a person, right? You're just a guy. You're just a girl. People might put you on a pedestal on social media, and you might.
Is this from like Pretty Woman? Like I'm just a girl. You're putting me on a pedestal, Mr. Deer.
See, she made it too.
But that's important. That's an important perspective that you have. There's some people that lose that perspective, I think, you know, and I think the people that are the most authentic, even when you interview them, are the people that realize you are just a guy, you are just a girl, you're a human, you know, and you have to be interested in that as a subject, not just necessarily their accolades or what they do or, you know, objective experiences, you know.
And I think if you're doing the interview, if you have that perspective, that might not be the best advice. It works for me. If you're interviewing Madonna, let's just say, I've never interviewed Madonna, but if you look at Madonna, it's like, hey, that was so obscure that I pulled that one out. But anyways, if you're looking at her as not like, oh my God, this is Madonna, the icon who's been around forever and she's done all these things, as opposed to this Madonna, like she cries at silly things. She has normal emotions just like everybody else. I think if you're interviewing them on a personal level, I think it goes a lot deeper than just like, oh my God, Madonna, I love you. You're the best. Tell me how awesome it was to do this. It's like, all right, stop like kissing their ass all the time.
That Chris Farley sketch on like SNL, like the hey, you remember when you did that? It was like Paul McCartney.
It was the best. I mean, that
was John really dead? Did you really die? Did you really die? I heard you die.
Rest in peace, Chris Farley.
Oh, yeah.
That guy was the best.
I will tell you, I watched that live, and I literally said to my friend, like even like at like 11 or whatever.
You watched Saturday Night Live?
Yeah. But I'm saying I watched that one as it was happening.
Okay.
And I remember thinking to myself that like he's going to die. And like I believe that he actually had ventilators on the side of the stage because like he literally was like so physical, but like he was doing speedballs. Weighed like 700 pounds. So, but that's kind of why it was awesome. And it's also what killed him because everyone said you can't have a skinny like Chris Farley. Like who wants to see skinny Farley? So of course, obviously gave him image problems, and then they
Well,
had
I mean,
cocaine
and his idols were, John Candy, John Belushi. Those were his idols, So they died young too. So he kind of was like destined to go down that path. I'm a
legend,
Farley fan.
Legend.
Just, I don't want to get too far off topic because I want to hear more with the interview, but just because of your perspective and since we're talking about it, have you seen, being in television, some of the pressures that some people are put under to behave or in a certain way or live a certain lifestyle for the camera, for the show?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak like on other people because I can only
no names. I'm talking generally.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure for a lot of people to put on some sort of persona, right? And I think owning your persona. I've done bad things. I've said bad things. I've said, stupid things that I wish I didn't say. But I think owning that, like I said, growing from that, even though if social media doesn't accept that or people don't accept that, you accept that in your heart, right? And that wasn't me. That was 10 years ago. That was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Whatever it may be, if you had a feeling about that and you could look yourself.
Was that what you were saying? Michael Jordan sucks? Was that was a lie, right?
Never.
I thought you said Jordan sucks.
Benny, don't even put
and
that
the Bears literally have nothing good going for them and never have, and that you've never been to Chicago or Wrigleyville if you have not watched the Cubs lose horribly.
See?
While drinking an old style, by the way.
You don't appreciate the Cubs winning the World Series without growing up and them losing every single day, right? So then when they won...
Well, they're like the real Red Sox story. Like, the Red Sox said that for so long, but the Cubs literally are like what the Red Sox lamented to be in 2003. You know what I mean? But the old style, and if you go to Wrigleyville, I will say that if you see the White Sox play the Cubs, like we talk about Boston versus New York, like the Yankees versus the Sox, but the White Sox versus the Cubs, you see people come out. Like, there are things when you're walking down the streets in Wrigleyville, specifically at Wrigley State Field, because it's the most historic fucking place like on the goddamn planet. It's like literally our Dome of the Rock in the United States is in Wrigleyville, Illinois. And when you see these people walk down the street, it's like the running of the bulls. It's fucking insane. There is an insanity that goes down in Chicago like you don't see anywhere else. Jeff, can you speak to that, being an athlete from Chicago?
Well, I mean, just being a Chicago, I think Boston and Chicago are very similar, right? As far as like growing up people and also how they love their sports teams, right? And look at the Red Sox and Cubs you just mentioned. Both of us couldn't win it forever, right? And we both had our day. But we are such diehard sports fans. You guys got spoiled with the Patriots, we got spoiled with the Bulls, So we all love our sports, our cities, our food, where we grew up. We're very proud of our city. So I think it's
ethnocentric, as they say in anthropology.
Yeah, you're good with the big words. I dumb it down for an audience for me.
So okay, we should continue on with the interview about Siobhán, because I haven't learned that much about her yet.
No, but he was saying that normally he would do more research, but that's part of his style.
Because he's got firsthand data right now, which is you.
Well, I was just saying how I would do it, right? Like how, and then I could interview her if you want. But I was just saying how, getting comfortable with interviewing people. My best interviews ever, like when I'm happy about my interview, it's because that person's cool and they're good. It's not because I interviewed them. Mm-hmm. Well, right?
Well, she's cool and good, so try her out.
That's a good interview. It's not my skills that make it work. It's the person on the other end, like working with you, bouncing.
Well, someone's got to coax it out. You gotta coax out the fun. You know what I mean? Like, so you might say that was a great interview, but like what you said that led them down whatever mine shaft you've taken them down, or whatever layer of inception. Because John Garabedian talks about it. Oh, Betty, you let them talk for like 90% of the time, and you just ask them interesting questions.
Yeah, but that could be difficult. You're right. Silence. I mean, what happens if you get somebody that is more reserved, or they're tending to give you shorter answers? Because we do interviews often with people that, like, for example, I've never met. And I always have that little bit of anxiety that's like, well, what if this person really doesn't talk a lot? And it's like, you have to really draw stuff out of them. I think that's hard. So what do you do in situations like that if you get somebody that's, that it doesn't open up easily?
Well, that's when curiosity just comes in, right? Or improvisation. The two biggest aspects for me, I used to interview the people going on Big Brother, right? So they're just average people going onto the show. They don't know what they're they don't know what to expect, right? So they're not necessarily, they don't know how to do an interview, right? Neither did I. I didn't know how to do that. As opposed to now where I interview celebrities, they know the game. There's no dead air. They know to bounce it back. It's so easy to do it with celebrities. But when I'm interviewing regular people that are going on a show, and maybe obviously you see them the first day do that interview on camera in Big Brother, like if you're watching the show, they're kind of like a deer in the headlights. Yeah. After 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, they're pros, right? The producers are asking them questions. They're bouncing it back, and you learn the process. So before they go on, sometimes it's pulling teeth, right? You're like, so what are you going to expect in there? They're like, it's going to be hard. That's when you got to jump in. You can't just leave it. You're like, then you have to, how, like hardware, where did you come from? What's hard to you? You came from here. Oh, you grew up on a farm. How would you oppose milking a cow to how you're going to use that into the house? I don't know. You just have to start brainstorming and being curious and asking sometimes dumb questions, right?
We're good at that.
Wow.
I'm not saying I'm good at it, but just like what I've learned over the years. And like you do notice someone who's been on camera for 30 years and making movies, and you interview them. And if they're cool, hey, take your time, do whatever. We're ready for the shot. Before the interview starts, oh, this is going to be amazing, right? They're already cool. And sometimes, like, hey, how long is this going to take? I got a meeting in 5. So, and then you're like, well, this is going to suck. Yeah. And then like what's going to be good before you even start.
Yeah.
And they're like, next season on House of Cards. Oh, sorry, Mr. Spacey. Oh, we don't talk about that guy anymore, huh?
Oh, God.
Where'd that come from?
So this is what Ben does. Something. We call that going off the rails. And Ben's been pretty good the last few episodes, but he's coming back with a vengeance tonight.
Yeah, he's hitting his joint a lot right now. So I just feel like it's going to start to get even worse as we go along.
See, the randomness is that you can't script that, right?
Yeah. It's like that's the Family Guy Bostonian in me. Is like literally just be like out of nowhere with like some fucking like Transformers from the 80s reference. Like that's just how I am. And if you don't like follow along with my crazy logic, then good.
Oh my
God. I love it, man.
Well, let me ask you this. What are some experiences you've had that have made you a better interviewer or host? Like, do you feel like traveling has helped you talk to people more easily, or, just doing it? Like, what are maybe some things that you can, like, let's say somebody is interested in doing what you do. What are some of the things that helped you be good at what you are doing?
Finding a commonality with somebody, right? That's the biggest thing, because then it's easy. So like if someone came on and they played sports and I knew they played sports or they played football in particular, we have that commonality. That's always a fallback. If the interview's not going good, I can always fall back to that. I think traveling was my fallback. Everyone has a story of where they're from or maybe where their ancestors are from. And I've been lucky enough to travel around the world with that show. And I have a story for like almost not everything, right? But in general, like if you're from Europe, I have European stories. If you're from Southeast Asia or Eastern, I have stories. I did a show with Alex, another thing called Missions in Action, where I did a show in Ethiopia and I was all in Africa down, so I have different stories from traveling that is always a commonality that I could reach pretty much anybody, and we could fall back to those stories. So traveling for me, I think, would be my fallback in case I got stuck anywhere.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it was a friend of mine that posted the other day that like 30% or less of Americans have a passport. And I don't know if that's true, but that's like fascinating to me that 70% of the population has never left the country. What?
Mine literally expired this last year.
Okay, well, let's say excluding people that theirs expired. But yeah, that was mind-blowing to me that amount of the population has no intention of leaving or doesn't, travel, right? Like, I think you're totally right. Like, it's so much easier to relate to different people and stories when you've been
How many people do you think are in Circleville, actually? Like, what percentage do you think of those people actually have?
Negative percentage, literally, not hardly leaving the town. I mean, but that's a thing. I mean, we live in such a large country, when you go abroad, you realize, like, in Europe, everything is much closer than it is here.
Do they look at you like aliens in, like, the food market? Like, they're like, oh, my God, that's the girl that does things. Because you're, like, the only one. To explain to Jeff, like, she literally, her husband has like a farm, but the farm is literally like a plantation. Like, and by a plantation, I mean like square miles of like Ohio.
Yeah.
And
so my husband and I met in the band that I play in, which is called Starset. So he's a guitar player. I play violin, but I'm originally from Michigan, and Brock is his name. And he is from this town in Ohio called Circleville, which is like 45 minutes south of Columbus. And it's just basically really, really small town, like Midwestern America. But he grew up on like in a farming family. So big, like corn and soybean farm. But it is, I mean, Columbus is a big metropolitan area. So you go into the city and, you know, you see people of different religions, ethnicities, backgrounds, a lot of college students. And then literally 30 minutes south, it's people that like have no concept of others.
The level of egocentrism is heavy.
Yeah. No, and it's wild. It's like I haven't spent so much time in this small of a place, you know, prior to meeting him, you know, so it's so interesting to me that like, yeah, you can be so close to a big city and, you know, it's a small town mentality. Yeah. That's a lot of people that have been here for generations.
Are there
they don't
little
leave.
pink houses?
No, I mean, it's old. It's, you know, from a lot of the houses are old, 1800s, 1900s. And, you know, there's not a lot of opportunity.
Or melons.
I don't even know how we got into this.
Yeah. No, little pink houses.
I also want to point out, I don't think it's egocentrism that you find in small towns. It's more like the village vibe. It's like this is my village.
Like the movie,
you know?
The Village.
Yeah, no, it's just more like these are my people. This is my area. Like it's
just less concern with the outside world. I mean, it's just different. You know, I'm a city person. I like traveling. I like meeting people that speak different languages. I like art. You know, history, music, whatever. And some people, they just want a simple life. It's different for me, but.
No. I think you guys bring up a good point. I think that's kind of what's going wrong with America right now. You mentioned 70% of America doesn't have passports. I think a lot of that has to do with like maybe financially they can't afford to travel
sure.
if they wanted to. But like you said, some people just don't want to, right? They're happy knowing they're 10, 20, 30, whoever's in that small town, and whatever mindset that they have about the world, they have like-mindedness with those people, whether they sit at the bar or go to the restaurants. So they're not seeing life through someone else's eyes, through a different perspective. I think that's what travel gives you, right? If you go to a new city, you meet new cultures. If you go to New York City, it's a melting pot. Chicago, Boston, they're melting pots. If you go outside the country, even better. Now you're in someone else's land, their territory. You have to respect their cultures, their wishes, how they see things. So if you get all these different perspectives and all these different views, you might be able to understand how someone who's different than you culturally, ethnically, sexually, you have a better perspective. It doesn't mean you're walking in their shoes necessarily, but you have a better perspective because you've seen different things, right?
A lot of people don't know what they don't know. So
I was just going to say the exact same thing.
That's what it comes down to. Is if you only high five.
No, literally, I was about to say that. Yeah, I'm glad you said it.
That's the way I look at it. It sounds so cliche, but it's perspective. And the smaller your perspective, you don't know what you're missing. I travel. I'd say like a normal amount for like a middle class person. Like I do the trips. I get out of I don't travel the world. I would love to at some point. But I definitely have friends and know people that have never really gone beyond the New England area, which is a beautiful area. You know, I have friends that went away to college and came back and then moved out all across the country. And it's very interesting to just see the transition from the people that you grew up with and you all had this bubble in your small town or just regular town, just your high school. And then the people that went away and with social media, you can watch other people's journeys, which is kind of cool. You know, seeing people that are becoming successful in fields that you're like, I've seen that dude do some dumb shit, but good for him. He is excelling at out there in that side of the country. So it's very interesting. I think it's you don't know what you don't know, and the more you know that you don't know something, the better you'll be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to knock people who don't like travel. That's what worked for me, and that's what's gave me a better perspective. But now with the internet, like you said, I mean, there's so many amazing documentaries just on Netflix alone. If you have a Netflix account, you could almost travel the world and see the different cultures because they really go watch Anthony Bourdain's show. I mean, that guy was my hero, right? You learn so much about different cultures, people, how life in their world works, what they respect. And it gives you a different perspective. So if you can't afford to travel, you could start there for sure. And then, have an appreciation for other people like that. Just America doesn't, I think almost, now my mind's kind of like getting weird too. I feel like Benny, but the bigger celebrity you are, to take it back like to celebrities, the smaller your world gets, right? So the bigger you are, and then you just have people around you, yesing you. Yes, yes, yes. You're the best. You're the best. You're the best. And you lose that perspective, and you know, like a Justin Bieber, who I love Justin Bieber, but he lost that perspective at a young age. And look at him now. He's learned from his mistakes. He came back to there. I don't know how I got to Justin Bieber from traveling, but
Jeff, can I ask you a question?
It's crazy.
If we were going to synthesize it, would it be fair to say that the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know?
Yes.
Yeah. But what's interesting too is what you're really referring to is curiosity. And what I'm interested in is how does someone become curious? You know, obviously some people might be more naturally curious. No, but this is something that I noticed.
Larkin, he'll tell you to eat some fucking mushrooms,
let me tell
bro.
you, this is what's interesting to me. So I grew up in a different type of, a suburban Detroit, but a lot of highly educated people. So part of my upbringing was being curious. You know, you want to go to a good school. You want to learn a second language. You want to learn a musical instrument. And then I come to a town like this where there isn't that ethos of curiosity, you know, where most people just aren't super interested. And I always wonder, like,
do they know what the word ethos is?
Probably not, but you know what? And I'm not trying to vilify anybody at all. No, but what I'm trying to say is I'm always wondering where that curiosity comes from, you know? So maybe you can answer this question. Like, were you always a curious person that wanted to learn about different cultures and travel? Was it something that your parents, you know, instilled in you? Is it something you got from school? Like, where do you think that started for you?
That's a good question. My mom was born in Italy. So my family came from that. My mom's side came from Europe, you know, I'm first generation, right? Mm-hmm. My dad's family's from Germany, but they were here for a while. So my grandmother on my dad's side traveled the world. I mean, she passed away. She lived a long, great life. She lived till she was 92. And she had pictures all over her wall of Egypt, which is still on my bucket list. I've never gone to. I mean, everywhere, Greece, every single place, every corner. When she retired, she just traveled all over the world. And I saw these pictures and I was fascinated with the Parthenons, with the Colosseum, with the pyramids. She's riding a camel.
Siobhán was like, that's my gig list from last week.
Oh my gosh, stop.
I mean, but if you're lucky enough to see all those places, that's amazing, right? Because it's almost like when you stand outside the Colosseum, and I don't want to get too deep, and I don't know if you've been there or not.
Yeah. It's
almost like standing next to the ocean, right? You're all these small problems and these problems people have online, and they're non-existent. You're so insignificant into the scheme of things and into this world. Like, how did that get built? Why is this ocean here? When you start thinking like that, like you're insignificant and this world's much bigger than you and you just worry about yourself. I think that's where the appreciation for life comes in, and you could kind of tune out some of the negativity, even though I struggle with that too. I struggle with the negativity, but having these conversations with other people that appreciate things like that or see things like that, it helps, right? In the scheme of things and in the appreciation, because you have to appreciate life, right? You have to have empathy. You have to appreciate life. You have to remember where you came from. You got to stay grounded. All these rules that I gave myself is kind of how I go forward.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I can relate. My mom is an immigrant from Scotland, so I'm first generation American too. And my dad's side was from Italy, but he was born in America. And I think, maybe that's fundamentally one of the differences too, is if you're immediately connected to a parent that comes from a different place. You know, because you have that instilled in you of like, this isn't the only way to live. Like, we also have experiences from this other country that's kind of like instilled in you as a kid. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's got to come from somewhere, right? That's why it's so awesome. All these documentaries that you might not even know, especially if you are from that smaller town and you don't know. Just watching some of these documentaries, you might have a passion that none of your friends have. And you're like, oh my God, I love this guy. Jeremy Wade, he catches these giant fish, and all of a sudden, you're on this fishing expedition. But you've never experienced that because all your friends want to do is play soccer over here, whatever it might be, right? So I wish I was more curious at a younger age about some of this, so I could have started my career a little earlier. But, like anybody else, I get caught up with football. You run around with your friends. You kind of don't vision the world like that. And then you grow up and you get outside that bubble, and you start seeing, man, there's so much more to life than what I was doing before.
Yeah.
Benny, are you interested in my stories?
I'm listening. I'm
That's
practicing.
what someone says when they weren't listening, but they have to make it seem like they were listening.
No. So the one thing that you say often, Siobhán, I've been told is actually what people say when they're not listening, because one of my friends who used to order escorts realized when he was in Miami and downtown that one of the gentlemen that he had ordered didn't listen to anything he was saying ever, because he would just say, "Oh, that's so fascinating. That's so fascinating." Because it would just continue it would continue the conversation, because he'd be like, "Oh, really?" And he'd act just like surprised and be like, "That's so fascinating." And
but you're not listening. If you say that and then you don't follow up with a commentary on what the person just said, then yeah, you're not listening. So
no, but he finally called them out, like thousands of dollars in, like 15 restaurants, and he's like, "What did I just say?" He's like, "That's so fascinating." He's
what
like,
was he paying him for?
Well, listen, I'm not here to psychoanalyze rich people buying people on the open market to do sexual favors.
Jeff, remember I mentioned like going off the rails? Like,
I rather listen to Benny. I think this is much more fascinating than my.
That makes one of us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people online that would disagree.
No, but that's a remarkable. I mean, to go back, it's a remarkable thing about our country in particular, right? Is it's so huge, and you can be in an area that's like an hour away from a major city, and there's like almost no interaction, or you can be in the middle of the country and have never experienced what it's like to be on the coast because it's so far, and it's hard to blame people because it's expensive to travel. Let alone going to Europe. If you live in Omaha, Nebraska, it's going to cost you a lot of money to fly to New York or to LA or, even to Chicago, right? Like there's costs involved, and it's not, we're not necessarily given that privilege as people here to have that luxury of traveling easily and for cheap.
I would say that's the number one reason why people don't do that, is because of finances.
Sure.
But you're right to say that you can research other places. You can look into other cultures. You can watch documentaries. There's resources available.
Oh, of course. Yeah. The question is just how do you spark that curiosity in people?
Well, that's why
because if it's there, if it is so easy, why not? Why aren't people doing more of it?
If COVID has not done anything, it has totally exacerbated the need for media of all sorts, whether it's good, bad. Like I've seen more documentaries aggregated and old movies and things that like probably didn't matter for such a long period of time, but because everyone is home. Like if you go on to Netflix and you see like whatever's like number 3 this week, and it doesn't matter what week we actually are in, like there's lots of movies that are literally terrible. Like you'll get like 25 or like a whole television series. You're like, how is this number 3? And it's just because people are being suggested to, and they're just being told and force fed what to believe. So the fact is, if there is actually something interesting, that's how people are finding out now, is because they're so fucking bored that they're like, you know what? I do want to know about the Menendez brothers. I do want to know what's going on with the Titanic. Like, you know what? I agree that we should definitely figure out all the different like undiscovered cities below Israel.
If you get to like page 3, 4, 5 of like the Netflix documentaries or Amazon Prime, like, shit gets real weird real fast.
Yeah.
What's your favorite one, Cory?
I don't know. We're always
Give
like
us an
skimming through them.
example.
I usually pop them on for the preview, and then you see it's like clearly shot by like a high school student, and it's like talking.
No, you know
about
what I watch? Not to interrupt you, Cory, but what's really good that's kind of on topic here that I think it's new on Netflix. It's called Hillbilly Elegy, and it's based on a book. No, it's good. I know it sounds bad, but it's about a small town guy who goes to Yale Law and the struggle he has with like pulling himself out of the mentality of like kind of deranged. I don't want to say all small towns are
Well, Jeff still talks like he's straight up from downtown Chicago.
No, but it's a good movie.
He worked at Portillo's for so long, he just can't shake it.
Oh man, that's one job. If I worked at Portillo's, I would never leave. I would have stayed.
You'd be way fatter.
I would have stayed there.
Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing now? We talked, in last part 1, a lot of your history of getting involved in TV and your upbringing and stuff. And obviously we've gone on a lot of side rails here, but maybe talk about some of the projects you're doing now and how that's going in this year.
Well, like I said, I work every day on a show called Daily Blast Live, which I have to deal with current events all the time. And unfortunately, politics is what everyone is talking about nowadays. So I love my God, yeah. I love what I do, right? I love the people I work with. We're going into our 4th season, and I've learned so much just from the people I worked with, let alone the people behind the camera, like I mentioned in the previous podcast. But so I do that and I love it. But I think, to get into some of the struggles, right, is the politics and the divisiveness of people just online and things like that in our country. Like we're so at on. It's like everyone is on a team now, right? It's like you have to be on a team, and if you don't agree with what their team is saying 100%, you're the enemy, right? So that's been, and I don't know, this is just my take on it, but that's been a struggle for me in what I'm doing currently. So again, it goes down to perspective. It's not just all, oh, this guy's on TV, he's got a great life. It's not like that. Sometimes I take it home with me if we have a tough day emotionally at work, if someone has passed away or one of my coworkers is going through something, I absorb that, right? Or if the country is in such disarray, I take that home with me, right? So that's a struggle that I kind of am dealing with currently. I love what I do. I'm very blessed with my job and what I do, but talking about politics every day is something I don't enjoy.
Do you ever feel like you took the wrong pill, like Morpheus, and that like you're on an acid trip and that you're literally peaking at the worst time because you have to talk about this shit? Because I feel like what's going on right now in this world, what you have to do as a journalist, what you have to do talking to these people is literally tantamount to like taking fucking hallucinogenic drugs. Because I would have never, if you went to Netflix 3 years ago, right, and said all the things that are going on, right? Like we have this, you see all these signs, like this is how people are acting, this is what's going on, this is what kids are suffering like at home, not going to school, like all these things that have now happened because of this. People would go, that's not even realistic enough to put on Netflix. So I feel like you must wake up, because I don't even, listen, we were talking to our friend Drew Ann Rosenberg the other day, and it was the day all the shit in the Capitol went down. And I had not even seen the news. And I'm like, I don't want to know, because it emotionally hurts me as well. And I can only imagine the fact that you have to have your face stuck in it, that it's got to be emotionally abrasive. When you're supposed to be talking about Mark McGrath's hairstyle and Justin Bieber.
Yeah, I could talk about the Biebs all day. I love that. But yeah, it is, man. It's crazy, right, Benny? Like you said, if 3 years ago, if someone wrote this script, you wouldn't believe it. You'd be like, that would never happen, right? And so that's tough. And sometimes I just like to strike somebody's curiosity or maybe speak for someone that's not sitting at our desk, in particular. And I'll kind of be their voice, not saying that's what I believe, but just being their voice to further the conversation or to get it a little more in depth. And then people online are so quick to judge you, like, oh, this guy, I see where this guy, he's coming from this side. I hate what he's saying. He doesn't know what it's like to be a female. He doesn't know what it's like to be gay. He doesn't know what it's like to be black. And I don't know any of those things, right? And, you get hammered with these labels nowadays, which is something that I really dislike. I like this. This is a conversation, right? We're talking, we're getting to know each other. This isn't a conversation. You're not having any conversation in 140 characters. And that's where our country is going. And it's terrible. You need to talk things out, right? So when I have 2 minutes to talk about something on, hey, tell me how you feel about Trump and Black America, and it's my turn to talk, it's like,
oh my
pressure.
God.
What am I supposed to say here?
I would just be like, I can't.
You want to know the one thing I extrapolated from this entire last month was that Twitter controls everything. Because when they shut off that dude's Twitter, first off, that's when I knew things were literally that's when I knew things were fucked. When I went online and someone said they actually shut down his Twitter account. And I'm like, what does that take? What does it take for that to happen? But then when I haven't heard anything, I don't know anything that's going on other than they say they asked for a parade, they're not giving him a parade, something. But we don't know because he's not firing off angry tweets. So I realize at the end of the day, Twitter holds the power of the people.
But listen, I don't want to go.
They could have shut him off way long ago, man. They fucking did it.
Well, we don't have to get political. We don't have to get political about anything.
I'm going to say this last thing, but here, this is a kind of a life in the day of me, right? So if Benny said that, it's not necessarily that I believe this. I'd say, but Benny, where do you stand on the First Amendment and free speech?
Right. Yep.
You might not agree with what he's saying, but you want to shut someone off because you don't agree with them. Everyone's shutting someone off because they don't agree with them, right? So if the person you don't like gets shut off, you're all for it. But if someone you like gets shut off, you're totally against it. And that's where we are as a
Well, that's why I'm a libertarian. I want to go live in the woods by myself, not surrounded by anybody. Don't come on my land. You would not last
a fucking shoot week you in the woods, Ben.
No way.
But so
that's how my daily, we do politics the first half hour and then entertainment the second half hour. But That's kind of like and I didn't necessarily sign up for what I'm doing. I love traveling. I love learning from other people. I love interviewing people, but this is where the job has shifted to, right? And I've got to shift with the job. So I'm learning from my co-hosts all the time. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to be open, be willing to absorb some of these comments, whether you agree with it or not. You have to look at your comments like your clothes, like, this was so cool for 5 years. I don't like it anymore. I don't wear it anymore. You have to have your thoughts the same way as like you wearing clothes. You can't be dug in to how you felt in high school and you're 50. That seems crazy,
That is, that's a really great way of putting it. And I'm just curious, as someone observing this who does have to get into politics or, just talking to different people over time, in your opinion, why do you think people are so divided now? Like, what is it that's happening in our society that has made people separate from each other and be on these teams?
Well, again, I think the short form social media has a lot to do with it. You can't have a conversation and get to know somebody else and where they're coming from through 140 characters.
Right. And without visual feedback. Yeah.
Right.
Real-time response.
You're anonymous. You could say whatever. You're very bold in what
keyboard warriors. They're fucking keyboard warriors.
You would never say, like I said earlier, no one's ever came up to me and had a disagreement from what I've said on TV. Because that's a personal, then now you're in a whole different situation, right? How is Jeff going to react in this situation? Is he going to say something mad? You wouldn't do that. But over the keyboard, you could say whatever you want. The anonymity of it, you're God, right? You could say whatever you want to whoever you want. That's a huge problem. And two is people taking these sides and digging their heels in and don't want to be labeled as wrong. Or, man, my thinking is so idiotic that I feel terrible about going back on what I said. So I'm just going to stick to my guns and I'm never giving in. It's like, you have to be like, listen, man, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I think at that time, this is where I was coming from. And you could have that conversation like we are now. I didn't mean that, guys. This is what I meant. My wife had a bad day. It kind of rubbed off on me. I kind of spouted off. I didn't mean to do that. This is what I mean. Mm-hmm. That's a conversation. That's human, right? Then now you're showing empathy towards another human or what they're going through. Or I might say, I did this. And one of my co-hosts would say, I didn't grow up like that. I didn't have that access of whatever it was. And then I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I was really, being arrogant in the way I talk. I hate the word white privilege. That's why I'm not using that word, but that's the word you could put in right there. And I have a whole nother thing of that. But there is privilege. I am privileged, right? In a lot of ways. And I'll say that, but I don't want to get too far down as politics.
Well, do you think JFK ever thought to himself, forgive your enemies, but never forget their handles?
That sounds like a war, sounds like an Eastern European war book.
So actually, the real quote is "Forgive your enemies, but never forget their names," and that is a John F. Kennedy quote. But now they have the handles
modern day version.
Now they're online. And it's like Jeff Schroeder 24. You know what I mean? Like the online fucking heckling 23. You know what I mean? Like that's how people are so anonymous now that them by their handles, and their hate, and they can do whatever they want.
Do you ever find yourself, second guessing, especially in your position with such a mouthpiece, that you have to almost run through a list of possible consequences before you say something, especially in a position where you're giving news and information that there's no gray area on for a lot of people, even though there is, but for a lot of people, what you say is going to have a literal meaning to them. And like you said, you're able to kind of let that, take that criticism as it comes, but has it influenced the way you present yourself?
Absolutely. It's weird. I'm almost having a conversation with myself while I'm talking. So I'm talking, and then if something comes up in my head, and if it's remotely I have a question about it, I divert from don't say that word. Don't say that. I don't know if that's offensive or not. And some of these words now that I would say regularly, they're offensive, or they come from somewhere offensive that I still don't even know. And I'll say it, and they're like, you can't say that. And I'm like, what? So I don't want to, I can't randomly think, just being totally obscure, right?
Sure.
So many things offend so many people nowadays. And if you say one of those things, we just talked for an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, I talked all about all these great things about how I got where I am, but someone might just clip the word where I just said, I don't like that term white privilege. right? So that's the only thing.
That's actually going to be the title of this episode. No.
2.5 hours. And, maybe I should explain myself a little bit about that so they don't.
No.
Well,
actually, that's the title of the episode. Maybe I should explain myself. I don't like the term white privilege.
Well,
you have the floor.
See, that's going to be the tag, right? But I think I don't like that term. I'll say I grew up perhaps privileged. I'm very privileged to travel, but to put everybody in a group, I don't like that. I don't like putting any race in a group, white included. I don't like segregating anybody. I think that's a problem with what we're going through in America. So I don't necessarily mean that. I mean every single ethnicity, every single sexuality. I don't like putting people in that group. That's the problem. That's where the teams start. And then you're like, well, you're not on our team, so you're against us. I'm not, right? I'm not on any team. I'm not against any team. I'm for mankind and for humanity and for people. And I think that's where our mind needs to start going instead of putting these labels, which I hate, on everything.
Of course.
Homophobic, racist, Trumper. These are terrible.
White Sox fan.
No, but here's the thing. I mean,
I hate these labels. I think to go back to that, I think that's a huge, huge problem in America right now is that people you could talk for 3 hours. They take this much and now you're labeled that person. It's like, okay, that's a problem.
Well, everyone's consuming content that they choose based on what they want to hear from a certain person, or it's just a summation of the stuff you put on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram. I mean, you're not getting real human feedback from the people that you're judging, in a lot of cases. We're lucky, the three of us, that we get to talk to a lot of the people that we read about or that we look up to, but that's so rare for so many people. Everything is just, what can you find on the internet about them? What did they say today? What did they say yesterday? And it's obviously unfair across the board to judge any person based on what they said in 140 characters necessary. Nobody knows the full story. Ever.
That's what sells. That's what sells.
Don't you know that good syntax is next to godliness, though, Siobhán? Like, I mean, you could see a lot by the use of a proper ellipsis.
How many quotes is like in Benny's head?
It's amazing. I have no idea.
The Rolodex in there, Benny.
An unlimited reel.
I know only useless information. You know what I mean? Like I actually am a cornucopia of useless information. But if you ask me something like, "What's your social security number?" or like, "Oh, I'm calling Verizon for 2 hours. I finally get someone," and they're like, "What's your 4-digit password?" I'm like 5150. It's Van Halen. And they're like, "Nah, you changed it." I'm like, "No, I wouldn't do that. It's always 5150. They're like, "Nah, man, you changed it." And like, I just want to fucking blow my goddamn fucking brains
Verizon is one
out.
of your favorite rants almost every time.
It's just so true. They 2020 me every time, and they have the power. It's just like Comcast. They can hang up on you, and there's nothing you can fucking do. Like, your cable doesn't go back on, your internet doesn't go back on, you're still unplugged.
How do you guys feel about like the feedback online? Do you guys get feedback or negative feedback?
Oh, nobody watches this. It's literally my mom calling me and saying she doesn't like someone because they use a stupid term.
Well, you gotta get some feedback, right? Even if it's from a guest, or like, how do you guys deal with that?
I think for the most part, just because of the show we have, where mostly we're talking to, we're not really tackling a lot of controversial stuff. People don't like certain hosts for talking over certain guests. But other than that, we don't really get a lot of comments coming through.
That's about our only negative feedback. Yeah. But I mean, on a side, we've all seen it in the music industry, though, especially. I mean, either with my own stuff or, I can't necessarily speak for our collective stuff, but, other musician friends where you can see public, on Instagram or whatever, other people that comment. Let's say it's a violinist that played something and someone who has never played violin in their life will say some like scathing thing about the way this person played something, or your shit, this is not any good. And I'm just like, I look at that and I'm like, I mean, where did this come from? Why do you have so much anger directed towards this person about something that they've put on the internet that you don't know anything about?
Projection. It's projection.
Well, of course, it's a complicated psychology, I'm sure. But, I think at least for me and from other people that I've talked to, a lot of it is just you have to just keep it in perspective. You can't take any of that stuff. Obviously, accept criticism and try and understand what people are saying about things. See if there's any constructive criticism. But destructive criticism, I think, doesn't take you anywhere.
A new way to emotionally cut yourself and others.
Yeah, I think we're all emotionally mature enough to like be able to realize that if someone is absolutely flipping the fuck out because of our stupid podcast, it's more of a reflection on them than it is on us. So we never, in our, even like the music we do, like Lost Symphony doesn't really have many haters because we're pretty niche type of music. And for our niche, we do pretty well. But there's definitely people that are very dug into their opinions, and they've let us know that they don't like something. And I think for us, it's like, oh, cool. Well, good. It'd be weird if everyone liked us. It's like,
yeah.
I don't think we're the type of people that would, we're not putting ourselves out there, our personalities and ourselves like you may have done in reality TV, where people get to see your emotions and stuff like that. So we're far enough removed that it is what it is.
I don't want to be a part of any club that'll have me as a member.
Oh, you're full of them tonight. So yeah, we got like 10 minutes left. I had a question I wanted to ask from the last episode. Jeff, you said that like Home Depot's your jam now. Like, what are you doing? Like this is prime. This is prime. Like
and people recognizing you over your mask. But I can tell you why. It's those beautiful blues, man. Like and those nice eyebrows and the salt and pepper going on. Like, bro, you got the Spinderella going on in between. Like, you know what I mean? Like everyone knows you.
No, I think it's a lot of my voice, like the way I talk. You mentioned I still talk the same. When
Chicago,
hear
the Bears.
My voice, and I'm just like, hey, where's the filters? In Home Depot, they're like, hey, I remember that guy. So I think it's like my loud voice. I think a lot of people recognize, but I'm not even kidding. So this is why I've been working all weekend since Friday to today. I've been to Home Depot, no joke, maybe 5 times in the last 3 days. I just did like our mud room, like. I took the closet doors off and I put like shiplap up and down the walls. And then I took like a big board, made a bench in there with 2x4s. And I also painted the bathroom next to it. So I took that whole area and I just redid the whole thing. So,
are you a big DIY guy?
I tried to be. I like taking on projects and stuff. And so I'm not like that guy, I can't like host a show and be like, hey, this is a 2x4 and you hammer it into, I don't know all that stuff. I have to watch YouTube videos. And then, like I said, you can do anything if you watch a YouTube video.
My fiance is going to watch this, and the only thing she's going to take from the whole thing is like, why didn't you paint the closet?
I like it. You don't like doing like hands-on?
No, I like doing all that stuff when I have time. Like, you know what I mean? And I want a better house, but like there are things where you leverage your strength. And like, I'm good at some things, but like I'm sitting here down here working on a mixer, talking to these guys. Like, no, I don't want to be doing like, I mean, I love doing some things, but it's just like, you can only focus on so much. So no, I don't want to paint a closet. It's not my aspiration in life, but I congratulate you on redoing your rooms. I'm just saying that Cindy, the only thing I'll be like, hey, you don't listen to this podcast. And she'll be like, that Jeff guy, he was really pretty. I totally got it about the eyes thing over the mask. He has a loud voice, but you know what? Why didn't you do that? Like, why don't you take on a room? Do you have a project?
I have the opposite problem.
I'll flip out. She'll just trigger me by saying, do you have a project? Like, do I have a project? I have 7,000 projects. Just none of them are any
we need
of
to rent
those.
Brock is what we need.
I was going to say my husband's like you. Yeah, it's to say I have to talk him down from his projects. It's like, what can I fix next? He's got to like build out this whole studio, and then he's got to like build a floor, and he's got to build a closet.
You can come to Boston. You can build us. You can build us stuff.
No, it's great. I mean, it's amazing. And it's the same. It's all DIY learning from YouTube. Like anything that he can build. He built this entire studio desk, and he's never done woodworking before. And it's just like he will study anything and learn it. And just like do it. And that's incredible.
He's like the lawnmower man. He just like sits there on the weekend, and it was like. And it's just flashing. He's like, I now know French.
I like this. You get a satisfaction from it. I like, finishing a project. I feel good about it.
Yeah, and you can physically see the results of your work. Whereas with music, sometimes it's a little more nebulous.
I had a conversation with someone recently because I built this room when I bought my house and all the treatment and everything. And I took my dad and I worked for months, and it's tons. And my friend's like, but don't you feel good that like you built it with your bare hands? I'm like, dude, if I could have afforded to have someone do it in a weekend, in a heartbeat. This was terrible. It was awful.
I'm with you.
Measuring stuff and then my house isn't perfectly square. That's a freaking nightmare. Like, I would write a check in a heartbeat.
I like it, especially having a house and doing things yourself. It's different. Like an apartment, I'm like, What? I'm not fixing
I
it.
don't mind decorating, dude. Like, look at all this. Like, all my pictures are all like neat and like
that's
perfectly
good.
arranged, and like I could put stuff in places, but I don't want to like paint and shellac and sand things down, and then like have to nail things in too hard, like to make things structurally sound. Like,
Damn.
that just sounds way above my pay
That's what I
grade.
just did all weekend. I shellacked too. I did everything.
Did you use any caulk?
Should we go down that way? Should we end it with that?
We're sorry.
Snapple, the best stuff on earth.
I like
I
it.
feel like I've been saying that a lot in the last few episodes. Just apologizing profusely for.
I'd say
fact-
you
the
guys
fact you're
edit,
here.
you edit that and be like, Benny says his line, and then you just stop the podcast. Drop
I
in
usually
some
just-
sound, drop in some metal from Benny, and that's it.
No, I usually cut it and put crickets after he says something. It works a lot better.
Or you can do the Tyler Durden and just put like one frame of a dick, and then boom.
I'll put dicks all over you this entire episode.
Just float them all around his window on the Zoom.
As we bring Jeff's credibility down minute by minute.
Hey,
Second
I
by
like it.
second.
It's not that high up, anyways, guys. There's not much you can't go. More.
Certainly not as high up as me.
You were high up at the beginning of this episode. I don't even know where you're at now.
Hey, how's Brian, Benny? Just side
He's
note.
good. He's so happy to be a dad and just basically say to have other humans to give him reasons not to do things.
He's gonna be he's the best dad at that. Huh?
Oh yeah, dude, he's living. But you know what? So I've actually seen. I've reveled in this concept that he now has 2 boys, and one of them is definitely going to be a lot like me, and he's going to drive Brian crazy so hard. But then the other one kind of has like some of his like attitude, so he's going to give like, so with Haley, like my fiance's
You're talking about your
daughter,
brother, right, Ben?
They have the same attitude. So when they give it to each other, they both set each other off, but it's like they don't realize that they're doing the exact same thing to each other. I can't wait till Brian has that happen, but then also has to fight someone and then call me and be like, what would you do in this situation? And I get to like be the cool one.
This is Brian Goodman, the other half of the Lost Symphony writing team, by the way.
Yeah, the one that doesn't matter as much.
You guys are the same, man. You guys are exactly the same.
Anne Marie
I love a
Cronin's
good.
like, Anne Marie's going to be so happy that I literally just shit all over Brian. She's like, oh, good for you.
I love a good Ben and Brian meltdown. Every time I've been in Boston, there's always been some monumental meltdown between the two of you. And
Ask-
it's
you
just
know
like,
what? We
why
have-
is this not on film?
We have Paul coming back. We have Paul coming. And I want to tell you that Paul has the best Brian meltdown stories ever. Literally the best Brian meltdown stories. We have, let's just
I love
put
how
that
it's
in the
only a
docket.
Brian meltdown. Were you
Oh,
not a
no,
part of
I
this?
melt down too, but Paul and I get along fine. Like, we've gone along fine. Like, really, we do. We've learned how to, like, to deal with each other's neurosis. Like, Brian, like, no, he does not. Like, Brian loves Paul, and Paul does enjoy Brian from a distance. Like, there's no question about it. But, like, does he want to be in a camper with him for 2 days? Like, I know how to, like, keep Paul happy enough where he doesn't want to, like, stab me in the eye socket.
Yeah, you and Brian have the same dynamic for when I met you guys. You guys should definitely
Some
film
things
an
don't
episode
change.
of you guys just going at each other for an hour or two.
Yeah,
I'm sure I have GoPro footage of that somewhere.
I guarantee
One
it.
of the Lost Symphony sessions.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, we're coming up on the end of it, man. Thank you for joining us.
This is the end.
Yeah,
It flew by. I mean, I hope it flew by for you. It flew by
Yeah.
for me.
it flew by. Yeah, it did. The second hour.
Well, I want to say thank you for coming on, dude, because like we really, you know, I've known you said 9 years. I've known you for 9 years. I met you completely by happenstance because my friend serendipitously dragged me to New York, like under cloak and dagger, and then next thing I know, I'm on like a fisher boat, you know, like with albino lobsters, eating seafood with you and taking shots, and like, you know, we've hung out a bunch since. We got to see the Panther in LA, which is an experience by itself, you know, and you've always treated me like family. And, you know, when I've met Jordan, she's always been just lovely to me. So I just want to say thanks for coming on the show because I know people give a fuck about a lot of the things that you do. And I've never known you for those things. Like, I had to be actually, like, again, recruited for Big Brother and subjected to watch the show because I'm like, I don't want to see Jeff this way. Like, I know Jeff in person. Like, he's a really cool dude that likes his Portillo's the same way that I do. You know what I mean? Like, but I really appreciate how much that you've also evolved in the sense that you appreciate the production side of things, the directorial side of things, acknowledging how important everything from lighting to makeup is to how the success of what you're doing. And that's something that I think our listeners really should, extrapolate from these episodes, is how important knowing how to do that stuff, and certainly the DIY culture, how important being learned in all of these things and cognizant of how important these things are to the success of your idea getting across to people in a meaningful way.
Damn, that was a great synopsis of the whole.
Yeah, Ben, you're great at the synopsis. I got to hand it to you.
Jerry
of all
Springer
the random
taught me
shit
well.
that you spewed throughout this episode, that was like first class.
Dude, Benny, you're going out on a high note. We should just end it now, man.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say.
And ladies and gentlemen, you've been 2020. Thank you, Jeff Schroeder.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. And honestly, getting to know all you guys, it's been fun.
There's video of me, like Kelly Clarkson is at our show, and I just look at her and I say, I want to fuck your face. And she's just like, oh, yeah, fuck my face. Like, fuck my face. I know you can do it. When you're that confident, like the audience, that I think that's a good lesson for anybody in any band. Like whenever you're playing new music, you just got to go, you're going to fucking love this. And if you don't, I'm going to kick you in the butt.